So anyway, I reached out to the local councillors and other people across the city who I knew, and also asked them if they had anyone that they knew who would get involved. And I knew a few people from kind of charities and things, and I brought them on. And I think, I can't remember the exact timeline, but I think I'd base yeah, you have to make some decisions in the kind of startup. And one of the things, having looked at the way Lewisham was operating, that was operating well. And as I say, I knew people, councillors, and it seemed that the wards organisation was the best way to go. So I just set up the page and invited people and set it up so that there was a list of council wards, and where there were already groups like Arthur's Hill, I linked to that, and where there weren't, I asked people if they lived in the area, if they wanted to take that responsibility on. And I think, there's obviously an element of trust there, and there's an element of, oh no, what if something goes wrong? But I think I just went with it because I thought people want to do something, people want to help. And if you live in a kind of cautious, you have to check everything, and then you'll never get anything done. You sometimes have to just throw caution to the wind and trust that people are who they say they are and want to do what they want to do. And I was just the administrator of it. I didn't want to. I gave support in that I kind of used some of the documents from Lewisham and produced some other ones to help people kind of set up their groups, and just give them a few pointers that other people had used if they wanted to. But there was no kind of hard and fast rules, because I think it's important that local groups are autonomous, because they know what their area needs, and there was no kind of diktat from above to say you must operate it this way. It was a very natural organization. It was a very kind of collaborative thing, and that was really important to me as well, because I think one of my most hated words is hierarchy, because I think hierarchies often don't recognize that actually everyone in an organization is important, whether they are at the top or the bottom of the hierarchy. They've all got something to bring. I prefer a more circular kind of structure, if you like. It was more or less autonomous, and the support network was quite informal. I think it's the nature of these groups is that everyone kind of had similar aims, so we were always going to work in quite a similar way. I think I was personally quite keen that we just did in Newcastle what worked for us. And I think because of the diversity of the voices that we had, sometimes that was a little difficult. I'm not gonna lie. But I think we kind of rumbled on all right, and I think we did a good job in the city. I think one of the issues perhaps was there was a reluctance, I understand, from the council to kind of have any kind of formal relationship with us. I don't know. I think it felt political. I think there was a culture of managerialism, perhaps, in that everything has to be managed centrally. We will do it best. We know what to do. And I think that kind of just ignores the fact that actually people across the city have got various different experience. They've got involved in charities or other organizations, and they know what their local area needs. And it would have been good to be able to work together, rather than, I think, it was kind of pushed to one side, and oh, you don't need to do this, you need to do this. And yeah. I think a lot of it was political. Yeah, my family was never really was never really political in any way. And I've spoken to my grandparents, and it's like, how how am I like this? Because they're just, they hate me talking about it. I'm banned from talking politics at the dinner table. Um, but I think it was more about my experience, I guess, from my teenage years to my 20s. I had quite a difficult kind of period in my teen years. I was kicked out when I was 17. My mum married my stepdad, who adopted me, and then they had 3 kids together, and I never really felt kind of part of that family, and I never really felt like I belonged. During my teen years, I was always out, I was always staying at friends. And basically, having thought about this, I was trying to forget about my kind of home life, because I just wasn't happy. So yeah, I got kicked out when I was 17. Lived with a friend for a time in Blythe, but was really struggling, wasn't entitled to anything, and was going to college. Had a bar job, which I think gave me about £75 a week, £20 of which went on my bus fare. So didn't really have anything, was staying at my grandparents in the weekend. So then I moved in with my grandparents, and it was, had a quite a difficult time until my mid-20s, I guess. Had various kind of rounds of therapy, and I don't really know what kind of clicked. I guess the trade union was the first thing I got involved with. I had a bad experience at work. I worked for a company called Eager, and had to put in a grievance that kind of took 6.5 months to get resolved, and really really destroyed me. It was a really arduous kind of process, and I don't know if that was the kind of formative thing, in that it was like, I think everything was me think I don't want anyone to have to go through what I've gone through. I don't want anyone else to feel the way that I've felt. Or I'm going to try my best to kind of to do that. Um I was living, like, through my early 20s, I was living hand to mouth. I never had enough money. I got into a lot of debt because I was just so unhappy. And if people give you a kind of a credit card or an overdraft, and you're not really used to managing money, I just spent it and then wondered how I was going to pay it back, and then didn't. Um, and so that's, I guess, what kind of drove me. I was always slightly politically minded. I remember 97. um I was 9, and I'm pretty sure I stayed up as long as I possibly could watching the election results, and I felt, a real sense of, oh my God, things are going to change, even though I don't think things were particularly difficult at that point. And I just, there was a sense of euphoria, and unfortunately, my household was a son buying household, so that's where I got most of my news from. But I did read the newspaper and things. And so I've always been slightly politically engaged. But and I was thinking about this recently as well. But I think because I, if I hadn't had everything happen in my teens and 20s, I probably would have been more politically active in the way that kind of younger people are now. But I had other things, other distractions to think about. But it came to me eventually, and I joined the Labour Party, having been a trade union member for several years, in 2015. The day after the election loss, actually, because I just thought, you know what, I've whinged about this. I'm absolutely distraught about this, and it's time to actually put my money where my mouth is, and get involved, and get active. So I think, well, I should probably, my granddad is one of my, like, heroes, I guess. I think he's great, and I think his connection to kind of fairness is something that has inspired me. It's, he is all about doing things the right way, and not, um I don't really know how to explain, but he's all about everything should be fair. And I have kind of loosely talked, because I've asked him about, because he was a miner, and he, as every miner was in the NUM, National Union of Miners. And he did say, actually, his brother, my uncle, was a big union man. So there was, not in my direct kind of family line, but just off to the side, there was kind of a political kind of offshoot. um and I think, my grandma often talks about how things were in the old days, and how there was more that sense of community, and people kind of um, supporting each other. And actually, to an extent, that still does exist in Newbigin. I think because it's a smaller community, it's easier to do that. There's less of a transient population. Things are quite static. And she used to have a card shop, that she adored, because it just kept her kind of connected to everyone. People would pop in for a chat, and so, I think it's more difficult in the city to kind of imagine that, how that would happen. But actually, there is quite a bit of, in the city centre, there is quite a bit of social housing, and there's less kind of movement in some places. So I don't know, maybe maybe there is opportunity to do that. um but yeah, as I say, I don't really know what kind of, I was never interested in kind of school politics and stuff. But I guess it was that fairness that my grandfather embodies, that kind of really drove me. And as I say, I had a difficult kind of teenage years. So my grandparents were the biggest kind of influence, and the I always saw, and still to an extent do, them as my safe place. So whenever I was kind of feeling a bit low, I would go there and just forget about it. And so they are the biggest kind of influences on me and my life.